So we can agree that of all the reindeer, Vixen must be the slutty one, right?
Certainly the hottest. I don't know what
Santa
you're
thought
thinking
so.
about.
He's like, "Oh, give me that one. I think I'll call you Vixen."
What are we talking about today, Mr. Gabe? We've alluded to it a few times. I have a little bit of background
Yeah,
for our audience here, but why don't you introduce them to our topic today?
we're talking about a Christmas film that Connor nominated for the show. I believe you've mentioned this as a possible subject for an episode since the beginning of the podcast. I think this has been floated, and the holiday season is upon us, and we have talked about the first remake of Black Christmas,
Did
and now we want to
yes.
talk about something a little bit more appropriate, but something that's also a little more disturbing to me personally.
Oh no.
1996's Jingle All the Way. No, when I say disturbing,
Oh,
I mean the, let's say, the kind of moral implications of the characters here. I mean, our main hero, Mr. Good Guy, breaks into his neighbor's house and nearly burns it down in his quest to get a toy for his son, because I guess that's the only way he can think of to earn his son's affection, because
oof.
he's a no good father. Obviously I'm playing that up a little bit, but no, we're talking about Jingle All the Way, a movie I had not seen before. I was very familiar with it because I am a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger. We're a pro Arnold channel.
Yeah, we very much, yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
That said, my blind spot with Arnold is, or rather, my blind spot with Arnold would be his comedies, his comedic body of work. I'm talking about his all out comedies, not his action comedies, or things that really play with comedy, like uh Kindergarten Cop. Or no, this is, even though there's a little bit of action hero tropes that they give to old Arnold to play with,
Right,
this is a family comedy, and
very
maybe
much so.
the first of his the first time he did that, right?
Yeah, because I mean he went the comedy route with like twins and such, but that was before this to my knowledge. This was 96. And so this was, I believe, the first. I mean, you could call Kindergarten Cop sort of a family comedy movie if you, well, I mean, I grew up watching it. Don't know if it was necessarily appropriate. I don't remember anything too overtly inappropriate necessarily. Not too much for a kid, especially like me, but yeah, I mean, look, you've broached a topic here. Jingle All the Way, released in '96, directed by Flintstones movie director Brian Levant, and produced by Chris Columbus. This is a 1492 picture. It was actually partially the script was rewritten by Chris Columbus just before starting, though he did not credit himself as such. This movie stars Arnold Schwarzenegger along with Sinbad, Phil Hartman, Rita Wilson, and of course Jake Lloyd, one of the most divisive child actors of all time, with
Again, not the
appearances.
word I would use here. Okay, Jake
Uh,
Lloyd did nothing to
he
nobody.
did nothing wrong. In fact, I am going to say a lot of things about Jake Lloyd throughout the runtime of this episode. I got a lot to say there, but those are far from the only people in the movie. We get appearances from Martin Mull, who recently passed away. Rest in peace to a very talented actor in Martin Mull. Harvey Korman, Chris Parnell, Jim Belushi, Paul the Big Show White, Vern Troyer, Curtis Armstrong, and Lisa Simpson actress Yeardley Smith. So we have a lot of people making appearances throughout the runtime of this movie. Let's see if it helps at all. Now, you had familiarity with this movie, but you had not seen it before. So, what are kind of the things that you heard? Because my perspective on this movie is way different.
Right.
So, what have you heard about this ahead of time that prepared you for this viewing?
No, I heard that this was one of Arnold's low points. You know, this is one of his more
I've heard that too.
embarrassing moments. This is at a very interesting time in his career where he had peaked as an action hero. I would argue he peaked with Terminator 2, both in terms of, box office, just pure star power. And I don't want to say he's coasting, but he's making these lateral moves to see if he can take his appeal to, let's say, other spaces, primarily the family friendly, PG, not necessarily action oriented comedy space. And this was one of the most successful, I believe, at the box office, but in turn, one of the most damaging to his reputation. Now, not as damaging as the movie that would come a year after this, Batman and Robin, but
Which we've talked about on the channel, by the way.
which we've talked about. And I don't have many kind words to say about Arnold's performance as Mr. Freeze. And I think I just avoided Jingle All the Way because it is emblematic of this era of his career that I have no use for.
Right.
And, just the word of mouth was, nobody had ever recommended the movie to me uh,
Hmm.
until we started this show and you came along and nominated this. Now, I didn't know if you nominated it because you actually thought it was a worthy movie of defense, or for shits and giggles, because sometimes we do that.
We
Um,
do sometimes do that.
yeah. So what's your history with Jingle All the Way?
Yeah, Jingle All the Way was along with Kindergarten Cop. That was what I knew Arnold Schwarzenegger as growing up. Batman and Robin in there too. Those were the three movies I grew up watching from Arnold. Obviously, later on, I'd see Terminator 2. Probably when I was about 9 or 10. But like early on in my life, this came out 2 years before I was born. Batman and Robin came out the year before I was born. Kindergarten Cop was obviously earlier on. So those were sort of my references and my gateway to Arnold Schwarzenegger. This, believe it or not, Jingle All the Way was a yearly watch for me and my family growing up. This was a beloved film. I don't know if by everybody in my household, but certainly from us kids, me and my brother growing up, we watched this movie a lot. And it's a movie that I've actually continued to watch as I've gotten into my adulthood as a part of the yearly holiday tradition. And it was an easy selection. I mean, when we first started talking about the concept of this show, we both were like, let's come up with a list of movies.
Yeah.
And I came up with a list of 20 films that I thought would be fun to cover, some of which we've covered, some of which we haven't. But this was one of those original 10, actually. This was one of the first 10 movies that I picked for this show. Um, and I just wanted a chance to revisit a childhood institution with my good buddy here, my co-host. Um, I actually didn't know until I believe we had a couple of conversations about what we could do on the show. The first Christmas special we did, which was Santa's Sleigh, we released that this year off of Patreon. Uh, Around that time, we talked about doing Jingle All the Way, and that's when I found out that you had never seen it before, and I just remembered right now. Um, so I think
I
this will be an
watched it.
interesting
Yeah,
conversation.
I watched it for the first time last night. Now, I was
Woo.
very familiar with Jingle All the Way. There are a couple of moments and exchanges that I would say have become memes
Oh
or
yeah.
something akin to memes. And I watched the Nostalgia Critic review of Jingle All the Way.
Oh, okay.
So I was very familiar with this movie's story, not just in broad strokes, but beat for beat. So, and unfortunately, we have to have an uncomfortable conversation about how that whole era of online reviews actually did kind of ruin movies
Oh yeah.
for the viewers. Even though people like the Nostalgia Critic said that what they were doing was protected by fair use. I don't know. That's pretty dicey to me
Hmm.
because if you truncate the entirety of Jingle All the Way for me, that I know it beat for beat after a 20-minute video, and kind of Rob, I willingly watched the video, but you take that away, whereas
Right.
Roger Ebert's review of Jingle All the Way will not kind of spoil the actual experience of watching it, even though he's giving me his opinion.
Absolutely.
So I'm coming at Jingle All the Way from a place of a fresh watch, but strong familiarity, and it defied a lot of expectations.
Mm.
And the expectation that I had is that this was going to be a toy commercial for a toy that does not exist, um, a star vehicle for a man who you could make the case that he was pretty overexposed by 1996. And you could definitely make the case that he has no business being cast in this kind of film, um, where he has to say more words than "I'll be back" or or something monosyllabic like that. But what I found, and this is the headline to me, is that this really is an actual targeted satire at the boom of consumerism that really took
Mhm.
hold of families in the 80s and 90s. Um, and it was also a really interesting time capsule for the 90s specifically. There are a couple of references here that have aged in fascinating ways. This this is a family film in which Rodney King is evoked.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jesse Jackson. They bring up
Jesse
Jesse Jackson as well.
Jackson, the Unabomber.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, look, there's going to be a lot of things to touch on. I think honestly, there's no better way to discuss this movie than to kind of take the audience through it, sort of beat by beat, like you described there.
Yeah,
Hopefully, you've seen this movie. If you haven't, and you want a totally fresh experience without any exposure, I don't. First of all, I don't know how you've made it this far without having that. But feel free to pause the episode, go watch the movie, and then listen to what we have to say. If you're on the fence about it, listen to what we have to say anyway, and then give it a watch. However you want to do this, you can do it. We just encourage that you do check out the movies for yourselves and form your own opinions about them. Without further ado, I think we get into the movie and jump in right where the movie jumps in with shots of Turbo Man. So we get introduced to this Turbo Man character, very Power Rangers-esque, I'd say.
a
It's
Power Rangers reject.
yeah,
Let's make this
basically,
clear.
yeah.
I would not have fucked with Turbo Man as a kid. I didn't
It
have
wouldn't have
very
been
high
something for you.
standards. I would, but I think I would have been a little too good for Turbo Man. But I feel like I grew up, post Power Rangers, where the standard had been raised for toys.
There were some, it's kind of funny because we sort of reached we were born at almost like the best and worst time for stuff like this, where like if you had family members that were really into it, you were exposed to it. I don't really remember a lot of Power Rangers as a kid. Like that's just not something that was really on much in my household when I was growing up. Um, I probably would have eaten this up though, to be honest, because it's like Power Rangers meets a Marvel character, and we do get some allusions to Marvel characters later on in Jamie's bedroom and such,
Sure,
but it's basically that. Like, imagine if like Captain America and Iron Man were existed as one character in in the Power Rangers universe. That's what Turbo Man is. He's saving the son of the president, played by Harvey Korman. Really weird cameo from Harvey Korman here. One of my favorite actors, truthfully. Um, Makes an appearance early on, and it's just this cheesy mid 90s like action kids show. What
and
did you
who
think about
else?
this opening?
Well, the opening was funny. It was more um, in on the joke than I was expecting. I think that's when I started to perk up and thought that
Yeah.
maybe this movie, had something up its sleeve because you see this commercial, and one of my favorite jokes is established here that kids love Turbo Man and fucking hate his sidekick.
Yeah. He hate boosters so much.
And then who else is watching the commercial but a very young Jake Lloyd? I don't know how
Yes.
old he was. He looks 5 or 6.
He was pretty young around this time. This would have been the year before they began like principal photography on Phantom Menace. So
Right.
it's not far off. The script has been in development. It's gone from Star Wars the beginning to the Phantom Menace. Qui-Gon is now Obi-Wan instead of Obi-Wan being Qui-Gon. For Star Wars fans, you'll understand what that means. But we see this kid. He's very excited to be watching Turbo Man. Clearly, a cultural icon of this universe that we enter into. Um,
He has an iron grip on the
oh yeah,
hearts and minds of children.
this
Like
isn't
he's taken over the world.
totally this isn't totally out of the question though. I mean, this was they said that this movie was kind of based off the wave, very specifically of the Cabbage Patch Kids,
Yeah.
and how absolutely they had a grip on the world, um, and how parents were reacting to these things. Yeah, this isn't totally out of the norm yet. We haven't yet in the movie gone out of the norm of
Gone off
something
the
that would
rails.
happen in real life. Yes.
Yeah, so Jake Lloyd is this kid. Rita Wilson is his mother, and
Yep.
his father is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is a businessman of some business that we do not learn anything about.
It's
Um,
like a fabric sales company or something. He's talking about the fabric being the wrong color. I'm guessing furniture sales, maybe, something along those lines.
yeah, they spent 2 seconds trying to
Yeah.
come up with
I do like
what
that
his
he's
job
just a
was.
businessman. You
Yeah,
know, he's just a business guy.
yeah, he's a business guy with a thick Austrian accent.
That's gonna come into play later. He's the only man
Um,
in Minnesota with a thick Austrian accent.
and immediately we know that he is his personal life is dominated by his work. He talks to his wife the same way he talks to his customers. And Arnold is about to miss Jake Lloyd's karate class,
Yeah.
and he leaves at the last minute, gets caught in traffic, has the first of many run-ins with this grumpy old police officer. A
Yeah.
very all cops are bad tone is set right away.
Yeah, it's set in a very I kind of like it though, because it's set in a way where it's like it's funny, like sort of like the way Home Alone did it, when he shows up at the house and knocks on the door and he's like, "There's nobody home. Tell them to count their kids again." And it's like, "Oh, what a dick!" Like, like you think that about this guy, but like he is technically just like Arnold broke the law. He's doing his
Arnold
job.
broke the law the first time of many times throughout this film.
First of many, yes,
Arnold
yeah.
is a danger to society, and he should not be a free man.
Dude, he and Sinbad should both be in jail. I don't care what he does at the end of the movie. We'll get into that. But yes, he gets this cop pulls him over. He tells the cop he's late to his son's karate class. And the cop, basically thinking that Arnold's trying to get off easy just because he's late for his kid's thing,
Which he
makes
is.
him go through a field sobriety test.
Yeah.
Which I'll be honest, I could not do the alphabet backwards stone cold sober. I'd be in
I
trouble.
guarantee you, Arnold Schwarzenegger cannot.
No.
He was the
No.
governor of the largest economy in the country, but he
Yeah.
could not recite the alphabet
No.
backwards or maybe frontwards.
Yeah, he started frontwards, but I'm not sure he could have finished. No, I
He
think
was
we're
struggling to get up to C.
yeah. But yeah, we move on very quickly from that. After he asks him to recite backwards, he gets to the gym where this was happening, but it's empty. They're cleaning it out. He gets home to a very disappointed wife and son. It becomes clear, and I kind of like this. I like when movies set this up in a way where it's like you can see that the dad clearly cares, right? He clearly wants to be there. His life is just dominated by his work. It's a pretty common trope of the time. But I kind of like how this one sets it up because the wife's not being unfair yet. Like she's reasonably upset. She hasn't stopped talking to him or been like, "This is why I've been staying at my parents' house." Nothing feels for it's just like, okay, you did it again. Fix this with your son because
Yeah.
you don't have to apologize to me.
But you know who is there for little Jamie Lloyd is scumbag neighbor
We
Phil
need
Hartman.
we need to talk about Ted.
I wrote down in my
Ted
notes
films this.
Phil Hartman sad face. Just
Oh my
that's
God.
I can't find the words to capture how much I lament the passing of Phil Hartman I believe this is one of definitely one of his biggest movies. Don't know how many films that he starred in. Most people, of course, will know him from Saturday Night Live. People who are in the know that he was a co-creator on the Pee Wee Herman character.
Oh my God, he was everywhere. And his importance cannot be understated to comedy in the 80s and 90s. Like he co-wrote Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Obviously one of the most popular Saturday Night Live cast members of all time. And he's been in a lot of movies. He's just not had as big of a role in most movies. He's a very good supporting character, a great voice actor.
He's
Simpsons
kind
fans
of the
such as myself
ultimate,
will know.
yeah, he's the ultimate character actor, and that's why he
Yes.
was considered the glue. He's an incredibly generous performer, which is insane for
Yes.
somebody with his talent. But that he uses his talent to support the people around him. He
Mhm.
manages to make Arnold Schwarzenegger better
Oh
by
yeah.
acting opposite of him.
Well, he's like an
And
evil Ned Flanders. Like that's what he is in this movie.
he's an evil, horny Ned Flanders.
Yeah.
He's
I wouldn't say he's evil. He's just a dick, you know?
he's pretty scummy.
Yeah, he
His
is. He's a sleazeball.
his come on to Rita Wilson at the end. It's
Oh, it's
pretty
yeah.
creepy.
It does
But
take a weird turn there. Yeah.
creepy in a way that's still palatable for a movie that's aimed at this kind of audience.
Yeah.
Because that's how much control Phil Hartman has over his performance.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's just two things that I can say. Phil Hartman was a legend, and it's just awful that he was taken from us only a few
Yeah.
years after his performance here, in a set of circumstances that I don't want to get into because they are
No.
really too bleak. But
Yeah.
if you weren't familiar with the work of Phil Hartman before, do yourself a favor, go check out News Radio. Even though you'll have to
Yeah.
suffer through Joe Rogan, a young Joe Rogan.
Got
Uh,
through a lot of things on that show. There's a lot of things you got to suffer through.
yeah, Andy
Uh,
Dick. But
yeah.
Phil Hartman is worth it.
Yeah. And I mean and just do yourself a favor and Google him and just see some of the characters he played on SNL. Go back and watch some of the sketches. There's a ton of them available on YouTube, so you don't have to sit through, you know, 10 plus years of the show. He played several characters on Pee-wee's Playhouse, so if anybody grew up on that, then they know he was involved in that. Yeah, just like an absolute gem. I think an unsung hero of like comedy, honestly, of any era. His stuff holds up still today, and this character is to me a perfect encapsulation of why he's so underrated because he does there is a genuineness to him that like you can see that some of the things he's saying make sense, right? Like later on he'll make a dig about how, you know, Arnold seems to be very particular about certain things, but he's not very particular about being there for his family. And it's low blows and stuff, but he's not off
Yeah,
base. And
and that's what
even
makes
in
him a
this
great
beginning part,
villain.
he's not. Yeah.
That's what makes him a great villain. The perfect foil for Arnold. They really are the
Oh yeah.
opposites in so many ways. And he is the person with the most serious comedy credentials in the
Yeah.
cast.
Yeah.
And he's
But
used.
Sinbad's up there too.
Well, I said the most.
It's not
No,
far, but Phil Hartman's obviously far and above everybody else. I think that's what you mean. But yeah, the Sinbad's no slouch. I'll say that.
I'm not saying he's a slouch. Look, I remember seeing the first kid in second grade when we when we had a substitute teacher, and instead of bothering to teach us anything, they just put on the first kid. So me and Sinbad, we go back, and
Go
I
back.
bet that his version of Kazam would have been better than the actual Shaquille O'Neal Shazam. You know, we
Yeah,
probably live in the worst timeline for
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But we're introduced to Ted, played by Phil Hartman. He is on the roof putting up Christmas lights, and he goes, he turns to Arnold. Arnold says, what are you doing on my roof?" And Phil Hartman goes, "Ah, well, you didn't bother to put up any lights, so I thought I'd spread some holiday cheer for you." And Arnold is not happy with this. He is antagonized by this man. It clearly sets up that this is a regular occurrence, that this has been happening. This is not the first time that these guys are having a run in, and it comes across really well. I have to give Arnold credit there too, because his side of that works perfectly with Phil's side of it.
Yeah. Do we want to really break down the meaty subject of Arnold's performance now, or do we want to wait till the end? Because I have a lot to say as we deconstruct Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance in this movie.
I think we should get to it just before we talk about the parade, because I
Yeah,
think
that's
that's the
fair.
moment where it kind of goes a little more off the rails. And I think
A little
much of his
more,
performance will,
just a little more.
yeah, just a bit more. But most of his performance that you could draw from this movie happens before that sequence. So
Yeah,
we'll sort of have a pause there to talk about Arnold's performance as a whole. But he, in this moment afterwards, he gets inside. He's trying to make it up to his son, and his son says the only thing he wants that'll make up for all of this is a Turbo Man doll. He wants a Turbo Man doll. He recites the whole commercial, like I'm sure you and I did to our parents when we were kids for whatever toy. For me, it was definitely like a wrestling ring playset. For you, did you have one as a kid that you
yeah.
remember?
There were these Spider-Man web shooters that sprayed
Yes.
silly
Oh my
string.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Those
was
were
pretty
awesome.
rabid about those. Yeah, and speaking of acting and performances, I just want to take another moment to defend Jake Lloyd. I know I already said my piece about this poor kid
Let's talk about
when
him.
we
This is
talked
a good
about the
point.
Phantom Menace, but I was really surprised that because he was a little kid. I wasn't expecting anything, and I'm not going to say he was doing something like award worthy, but he was good.
He was really good.
His chemistry with Arnold was like actually really funny. And he's another person who kind of makes Arnold better. When Arnold is doing
Oh,
that cringy karate
100%.
routine, I didn't laugh
Yeah.
until they cut to Jake Lloyd and the face he made. So we literally bullied Jake Lloyd into having schizophrenia. Like I, the amount of grief that I have for this kid is really
Yeah.
overwhelming. It definitely overwhelms anything I have to say about his acting. So having him and Phil Hartman in the same movie, you know, there's some dark energy that circulates.
For sure. And you know, it's a holiday. When I watch this, I like to try to only think of the things that I enjoy from
Mm.
everybody in this, because there's a lot you could dig into with this if you really wanted to. With Jake Lloyd, you know, I just want to build off of what you said there. I think it's more than a good performance. I think this is a great child actor performance. He shows there are times in this movie where he shows intense sadness and emotion, and he does it really well. There are times where he shows anger, and he does it really well. I think honestly, like if you were to watch this and Star Wars, if you've already seen The Phantom Menace, okay, if you've already seen it, you might notice some of the things that bothered you in The Phantom Menace. But if you haven't seen it yet, when you see The Phantom Menace, you're gonna be like, "Well, this kid was so good in Jingle All the Way. Why is why didn't he say that?" But I think you look, George Lucas's writing. We've talked about it. If you want to see our full thoughts on that, go watch the two times we talked about The Phantom Menace, or the one time we talked about the Attack of the Clones. But I will say this. I think this movie and its script do Jake Lloyd a lot of justice, and he does his fair share to make that character as good as it can be. And he does a really good job. He's a believable kid.
And the movie establishes things in a very economical and a very efficient way
Yeah.
because I was watching another infamous Christmas movie the other day, which I might encourage us to do, and It's That Bad on.
Oh,
And I couldn't believe how much time they were wasting. I mean, when you're a screenwriter, one of the first things you're taught is that Act One needs to be done by page 26, you know, minute 26.
yeah.
Um, so we need to establish all of these dynamics. We need to establish the want. We need to establish the obstacle, and we need to plant seeds for the character arcs. And this movie, you know, it does it in this perfectly gift wrapped fashion. I'm not going to call it brilliant, but it is very professional. And
Yeah.
you know, it gives a really great framework for what I'm going to describe as a family friendly, Christmas themed After Hours. Have you seen After Hours by Martin
Yeah. Oh, that's a
Scorsese?
good point.
Yeah.
That's a good
You know,
point.
it's
Yeah.
this 24-hour period through hell. It's like Kafka-esque and manic and crazy and constantly escalating it into more and more bizarre scenarios. That's how I would describe this movie. And I'm
Yeah.
sure to critics, it seemed like a little much, or just seemed like this movie um, was off the rails and bananas
Yeah.
in probably a lowbrow way. But I don't know. It's for me like watching him go through these kind of episodes in his Odyssey. It really worked. In terms of like adhering to the basic rules of comedy, and one of those rules is escalation. So he goes
Yeah.
to this toy store. That's where he runs into Sinbad, this disgruntled postal worker,
Yes.
and they have a fight for Turbo Man inside the Kmart. And then what do they do after that? Do they have to go to the Mall of America?
Well, so okay, so here's how it progresses. In this part, we don't have to spend a lot of time on, so we'll just blow past. So basically, Jamie tells him what he wants. He talks to the wife about how they had this good time in the room, and then the wife is like, "Hey, remember when I told you to buy that toy? Did you do it?" And he didn't, but he lies. So the next day, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go out and get it. I'm gonna get it from the office. That's where I left it." But he doesn't have it. So he goes to a store, obviously meets Sinbad. We get some hilarious stuff from Sinbad talking about the toy cartels, and it's really really good. I can't do it justice. It's a
Yeah,
rant of epic proportions.
and let's talk about
Um,
Sinbad here for a second. One of the big
yeah.
things I'd heard is that this was just an embarrassing performance from Sinbad. Um, and I don't know about you, I've never encountered anyone who's particularly fond for Sinbad, and they will often cite his performance in this because I think this might be the most exposure he's gotten doing this
Um,
movie.
I think across like a more broad demographic, I'd say so. I'd say this is like the thing that more people from all walks of life will know him for,
Yeah. Okay.
if that
All
makes
walks of
sense.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say about Sinbad in this movie. There's a really funny performance in here. Now, what we do get in the final cut is still funny. I think they could have cut some of his longer bits out, which is a problem, to be fair, that a lot of comedy movies had back then and they still have today. They just let
Yeah.
these actors improv because, hey, they're really talented comedians. So why would you, the screenwriter, not want them to, not want to use their talent? So outsource the jokes to them. And then, they just have, I'm sure, hours of footage of him just riffing with Arnold.
Oh yeah.
And it's hard to cut out a lot of stuff that you in the editing room thinks is gold, but to us the audience it starts to wear on me a little too much. But I
Oh,
can tell
okay.
you some jokes of his that I loved. I
There
love
are a ton of them in this
there's a
movie.
ton of them. There's a ton of them. I mean, we'll talk about probably the best gag in the whole movie later on
Yeah.
when he threatens
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
with a bomb
Yeah. We'll
in
get
his
there.
postage.
Certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and he and Sinbad are rivals. I thought they were going to be a buddy duo, but they're actually rivals throughout the whole movie, which I thought was interesting. That's something I didn't expect.
It's like a love-hate rivalry because like they're in the same situation, so there's this level of like relatability between them, even though they're very different types of people, which I do kind of like how like Sinbad's sort of this like, as far as like economic goes, he's like a lower middle class, government worker who's frustrated. I mean, look, I mean that's still a topic of today about how postal workers are treated and how they feel and how the postal system works.
Yeah, just
And
yesterday, the president elect said that he wants to privatize the post office.
Yeah, I mean it's
Still
still
very
a topic of
relevant.
conversation. And in this, they have their spat. There's this pretty exciting fun sequence in this store where they have a fight for the toy, and then eventually Chris Parnell and another actor tell us that that in a really good scene. Like I laugh every time I see it. Just Chris Parnell, another actor that I think doesn't get a lot of credit as much
He
as he
shows up
deserves.
so much though. You see him in so
Oh
many
yeah.
things.
Oh yeah. I mean he's great in everything that he's ever done in my mind. For anybody who doesn't know who Chris Parnell is, just look up Lazy Sunday from Saturday Night Live and have a great time with it. But he's in this and
For the record,
he
my
talks about
favorite, yeah, my
Booster.
favorite, my favorite, my favorite performance of his is as Liz Lemon's doctor from 30 Rock.
That's a great one. I also he's in my favorite is Hot Rod. I really
Yeah,
like his role in Hot Rod. I think that's another underrated movie. But nevertheless, he's in this very shortly. Talks about how, this is the most popular toy. Of course, it's sold out, but you can get Booster if you want Booster. And they're all laughing at Arnold and
because everybody fucking hates Booster.
everybody hates Booster. And that's I love the continuation, and the crowd is laughing at Booster will get a funnier moment a little later. But for now, Arnold kind of threatens them, goes out and decides he's going to call home. He wants to check in with his wife, and let her know that he's going to be late because he's still
Yeah,
looking for the
late
toy.
to the parade, but
Late
that's
to
an
the
important
parade.
thing. That
Yes.
there's a Turbo Man headlined parade
Mm-hmm. A
happening
Minnesota
later
Christmas parade.
that he
Mm-hmm.
needs to attend. By the way, I love that this is set in Minneapolis. I love
Me
when these
too.
movies aren't set in LA or New York. And I'm sure they did, a huge chunk of principal photography not in Minneapolis, but they got a lot of really fun exterior shots that if you
Yeah.
if you just like cities, if you like seeing
Yeah.
real places in your movies, yeah, I was really fond of that choice.
And actually filming on location in Bloomington at the Mall of America, which we'll get to in a moment. It's Mall of America is incredible. I can't wait to go back there one day. I went very, very young, so I don't have a ton of memories of it, but very amazing mall. If you've never heard of it, please seek it out. It's a tourist location around the world. People come from everywhere to see the Mall of America. But before we get to the Mall of America, he calls home. And this is a line that still exists in my life today. He calls home, and Ted has sent his wife off to take a shower to get ready for the parade, and he is finishing her cookies that she's making when Arnold calls. He answers the phone, and we get a few funny gags from this. Arnold is like, "Where's Liz?" And he said, "Oh, she's in the. I think she's still in the shower. You want me to go check for you?" And no, he starts getting terrified. But then he's like sensually eating cookies into the phone, and he's like, oh God, these cookies are so good. And eventually we get, I think, the most famous line from this movie, right? It's got to be, right?
Easily, easily.
This is the one that
Say
everybody
it in your
knows.
Arnold voice. I want to hear you do it.
Nobody knows any other line from this movie except for "Put the cookie down." It's
Pretty
so good.
good.
It's
Pretty
delivered
good.
perfectly by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and another moment of them bouncing off each other.
All right, and look, here's I think actually where we do need to talk about Arnold's performance because at the first note I wrote down as I started watching the movie is why Arnold. I asked myself that question: why cast Arnold Schwarzenegger in an everyman role like this? Doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. Doesn't make sense. I can't think of an actor
Who's
I
less
can
of an
relate
everyman?
to. Yeah, that I can relate to less than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Maybe Jean-Claude. Maybe Jean-Claude.
Maybe between the accent and his
Yeah.
physique and just the fact that by 1996 he was one of the most iconic movie stars and action heroes that had ever lived.
Yeah.
I was really puzzled by that at first, and then I realized that one of the best jokes about this movie is just the fact that Arnold is playing this character. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
that in and of itself is the joke, and it's, as it turns out, a really funny joke
Very funny joke.
because
Yeah.
there's no other reason why put that cookie down should stand the test of time. you know um
Oh
but
man.
because it's Arnold.
Yeah.
And here's another thing, his character is going to take a lot of abuse through this movie. I'm talking
Hmm.
pratfalls, people being dicks to him.
Yeah.
Much of it is deserved to his character. His character makes a lot of
Yeah,
mistakes.
right.
But another thing is that you can't actually feel bad for Arnold. You don't hurt for Arnold.
It's not, it's very much done in a Home Alone type way, where
Yeah.
like the wet bandits or the sticky bandits. I'm gonna say the first Home Alone because I put the second one on such a high pedestal. It's very much done in that
Are
similar
you
way
saying you
where these
prefer
guys.
Home Alone 2 to Home Alone 1?
Oh, easily it clears it.
Okay.
Easily, yeah. Maybe we'll have a conversation about that at some point. But
Is it because
eh,
did you vote for the most famous cameo
Oh, we're not
appearance?
going to talk about that. But no, it's very much done in a similar kind of way. Just it doesn't go as far into making you hate this guy Arnold. Like there's a relatability that there's not with the Wet Bandits, but it's the same style where it's like, okay, we don't want you to feel too bad for this guy because then our funny moments where he's getting hit by purses and being called a pervert are sad. We don't want it to be sad. We want it to be
Exactly.
fun, and they
And
balance it well.
when I say that you don't feel bad for him, I'm not saying that Arnold's not likable in this. He's likable
Right.
as all hell.
You feel
That
just bad enough for it
it's
not to be sad.
you know what I think as I watch this, I think, oh, Arnold's such a good sport. He takes this
Yeah.
role where people beat up on him and people are mean to him, and he makes a lot of self-deprecating jokes, and that's what I think. Arnold's such a good sport. It's so fun that he would do something like this.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, you'd never see like Stallone. We talked about this somewhere. We won't bring it up too much. Rocky 5, we have discussed at some point. We'll say personally. We've discussed it personally. And that's a movie that we sort of talked about where like Sylvester Stallone had this period where it was like he was almost like unbeatable, right? Like every movie he was in, like he would be knocked down, but it was just for the purposes of
but
his story. He
in
never
a
looked weak.
he was unbeatable in a really smug way.
That's what I mean. There was this like arrogance of like, well, I'm Sylvester Stallone. I shouldn't have to do that. And he's talked about that. He's talked
Yeah.
about that period of his career and how he regrets a lot of the decisions. We talked about Judge Dredd on the channel. That's another movie that's an example of this, of his arrogance sort of shining through during that time. And Arnold, not to say he's not an arrogant guy. I'm not
Quite
making
the
that assumption.
contrary.
Yeah. Especially when you start talking to him about his run in politics and his role in the overall action movie zeitgeist or whatever, but he knows his strengths, and I do believe that he does have a strength in this sort of slapstick self-deprecating style, and I don't know if he knew that or if this was just like, hey, you're paying me a lot of money, but
He
I'm
was
kind of
paid
sad
$20
that we didn't
million,
get more of
by
it.
the way.
Oh
As I
yeah.
say, oh,
Oh
he's
yeah.
such a good sport, as
But
if he's not being paid
people have been paid
a
more and
fortune.
done less. So we do have to highlight that.
That's fair. When you hire Arnold, you get your money's worth. I kind of reserve that statement for Batman and Robin. I just frankly don't see much effort from him in that performance.
There was a lot of issues surrounding Batman and Robin too. I mean, it was
Yeah,
far from
certainly.
a flawless production.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like no shade to Arnold. I don't expect him to pour his heart
Oh
out
yeah.
for Mr. Freeze, but here I see that he came on board to a project that he's on record as saying that he had a good time on. He liked working with Phil Hartman. It was fun for him to play a family man and not a cyborg or
Yeah.
a commando or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was having fun with it. So while I can't, there's not a lot of finesse to his approach, especially when you contrast him with a Phil Hartman. The joke is that it's Arnold and that it's Arnold doing
Yeah.
all of these gags. And I compared this to After Hours, but After Hours, I actually have a really hard time watching After Hours, despite what a masterpiece it is. My wife kind of gives me grief about it because she loves that movie and she thinks it's funny.
Oh
I watch
really?
all these like horror movies, really nasty ones, but I have a hard time with After Hours. And Griffin Dunn is just, I feel so bad for him. I don't want to
Yeah.
see him go through all of that. Like he's this harmless, defenseless, helpless, urbanite, and I just have a hard time. I feel his pain too directly,
Yeah.
and that's just not something that I have a problem with here. So if they had cast a regular Joe Schmo in this role, I'm not sure how some of these gags would have landed. Like, would it have been as funny if it was, a true everyman actor fighting off that crew of con men Santa Clauses?
So, okay, there is a version of this movie with some of the action tropes written out that could have worked with an everyman, but like it's so impossible to picture. Like, because before I would have said like, oh, maybe like a Matthew Broderick would have been so cool for something like this. But then I've seen Deck the Halls, and I know I don't. Some roles just don't work for him, and Inspector Gadget. And so like this is the kind of movie that's like it was written for Arnold. It wouldn't have worked with another action star, especially another action star. And I don't think it would have worked with an everyman. And but something that you said there, and I'm gonna sort of transition this to talk about the next sequence we get, the next battle for the Turbo Man doll, by saying that like it sort of layers how bad you feel for him with what's happening, because he's less and less deserving of what's happening as it goes along, but he's also getting less and less screwed over, and you're supposed to feel bad for him at certain points. So like this first sequence, he's a dick. He didn't get the toy in time. He's got to go get one, and he gets screwed over, and everybody's laughing at him, right? uh Calls home, has the thing with Ted, and then he overhears a guy saying that they got a shipment at this store that's in the Mall of America. So he tries to drive the Mall of America and backs into a police motorcycle of none other than the police officer that pulled him over at the beginning of the film. So he's delayed again. He gets to the Mall of America. They do a ball lottery to pay double the price for a very few selection of Turbo Man dolls, which, by the way, another thing taken directly from real life. This is something that was actually happening at places.
Yeah.
And before people think that, like, I know things aren't like this now, but look at news headlines 10 years ago for Black Friday. I know now it's different. Most people will shop
Is it
online.
different? I think
It's
what's
it's
different is
not
that
as
we're
crazy.
we're stampeding over each other for, for iPhones or
Well, so
smart
it's
TVs.
you just see it less, right? Like most, like there are stores that have come out after Black Friday events and talked about like this was the most disappointing Black Friday we've ever had. Our sales were half of what they used to
Mm-hmm.
be. I mean, more people are shopping online than ever. That like if you look at news headlines 10 years ago, you will see full-grown adults ripping toys out of the hands of children and ripping headphones out of the hands of children and fighting each other for products and just stacking their carts with items, and it's like the worst of consumerism. And I'm a defender of consumerism. I eat that shit up, but there is a dark side to it.
Was this movie maybe partly responsible for your affection for consumerism?
You know what I think it was I really do think Star Wars was the thing for me that did it as a kid. Because it was so cool for me to like watch a movie where they had like lightsabers, right? And then I could go to the store and see a poster with Darth Maul's face on it, and right underneath it was a lightsaber. And I can say, that's a cool poster. I want that. I want that lightsaber too. And so, but this movie had that sort of opposite effect on me as a kid that it does as an adult. As a kid, I'm like, of course I would fight everybody for a Turbo Man doll. What? Like you can like if they released like a rock action figure back in the day and I really wanted it, I would bite somebody's hand off to get that fucking thing. Are you kidding me? But as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, this is horrific. Like but it's done funny, don't get me wrong, but like thinking of the real life implications of stuff like that, like stuff like this was happening places. But I guess nonetheless, if we don't want to get too serious here, Arnold gets a ball, gets pepper sprayed by Sinbad, and the ball falls into the hands of a child, going through the playground of the Mall of America.
And Arnold chases this kid
And
through the
androgynous
playground.
child, yes,
Yeah. Who is a girl.
who is a girl, yes, who is a
Um,
girl.
did not think it was a girl at first, but
Did not either, but
yeah.
hey, not here to judge. That's not what we do.
Um, and
He gets to the kid eventually in a ball pit. um.
and then gets and here's where we
Oh
get
God.
some dashes of adult humor. So
Yeah. Oh
Arnold,
yeah.
everybody thinks that Arnold is,
A diddler.
is a diddler.
Which
Uh,
underrated line, I think, because he offers the ball, right? And he's like, I have this nice shiny ball. We do you want to trade? And then, the kid puts it in her mouth. He tries to get it out, which don't grab a kid's face. I feel like I have to say that to people still don't grab a kid's face, especially when you don't know the child. And he rightfully gets beaten with purses and they call him a pervert. And he gets out of the ball pit and standing in front of Jim Belushi Santa Claus, he goes, "I'm not a pervert," and it's just delivered so
Again, though, it's
perfectly.
because it's Arnold. If the wrong
Yes,
actor said that,
yes.
that would
I'm
kill
not a
your
pervert.
career. Like not every actor can get away with that. But Arnold,
Absolutely not.
um, it's just too harmless. It's so funny. He made a career out of being a professional killer on screen,
Yeah,
but he's still so harmless and so affable.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
like exactly where you want to be as a movie star.
Yes, and he does it perfectly here. And after saying "I'm not the pervert," he talks. He says, "I just want the Turbo Man doll," and he happens to be directly in front of Mr. James Belushi, another underrated comedic force. Great show growing up, according to Jim. I don't know if you got a chance to watch that at all as a kid,
What
but
show?
according to Jim,
Oh, that's the show.
yeah.
That's the name of the show. No, I'll get my thoughts of Jim Belushi out of the way.
Uh-oh.
If you had asked me to name the lamest actors in comedy, um,
Oh.
Jim Belushi would have been in my top five
Oh
before
man.
before I saw him in Twin Peaks: The Return. That's
Okay.
one of the few times an actor has completely redeemed themselves in my eyes. Um, because before, and it's just so easy to dismiss him. Like, the reason the guy is famous, it seems, is because he has the last name Belushi and he has a passing resemblance to his dearly beloved, gone too soon brother.
He's not the worst of a famous person's siblings. I
Far
mean,
from
Frank
it.
Stallone still exists,
Far from
but
it.
yeah.
And that's why that's why the word I would have used is lame. Like, if he wants to pretend to be one
Yeah.
of the Blues Brothers, okay, let him knock himself out.
Mm,
It's not something I want to see. But he has since redeemed himself in my eyes, and he's actually not bad here. I
yeah.
even before the redemption arc, I would have said that he, is pretty all right as this sleazy mall Santa.
I like him as a support. I will say that, like, aside from his sitcom, which, as a kid I enjoyed it. I don't know how it hold up today. I don't know if it would hold up as much as like the Drew Carey show does for me. But I don't know, maybe it would. But in this, he's like the perfect supporting role here. He shows up as this black market Santa Claus with this, and one of my favorite bits of the movie, it comes right here where he's whispering, he's like, "Don't you want to get a Turbo Man doll for your kid?" And he has his thug elf,
Mickey from
who's,
Seinfeld.
yeah, Mickey from Seinfeld. He comes walking out, he's looking around, and he shows this picture of him holding the Turbo Man doll and that day's newspaper, which is it's one of my favorite bits in any Christmas movie. I think it's so funny. It's done so perfectly as this like mafia Santa Claus, and it's paid off even better when Arnold agrees to go get this Turbo Man doll, and they take him to this like warehouse that's guarded by German shepherds, and it's just full of Santa Clauses and elves. Um, we get a good sequence coming up here that we'll talk about,
We
but
get
the
a great
build to it
sequence
is
coming up.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, yeah, Arnold needed scenes like this. I think it
Oh
would have
yeah.
felt something would have felt missing if he didn't get any nods to his resume as an action star.
The script was written for him. I mean, like this is a perfect sequence for a movie like this.
Yeah. So yeah, he does this under the table deal with
Three
the
hundred dollars for a Turbo
$300,
Man doll.
which that was in the 90s. I don't know what
Yeah,
that
I'm gonna
is
look up
today.
right now how much that would cost as you go through this. How much that would be today.
So he, against his better judgment, buys the Turbo Man doll, and stupidly gives them the money before verifying this purchase, verifying the actual item he's receiving because it's wrapped up, it's gift wrapped.
Yes.
And then he starts opening it, and Jim Belushi, in his funniest line, just goes, "Wait, don't open it now." And then he presses a little Turbo Man. It's like, "Hola, yo soy Turbo Man." Um, and Jim Belushi, has a funny
It's the
line,
multilingual model. You play with it and you learn something.
and
Uh,
then Arnold, he can't get his money back, so he calls them all a bunch of criminals, and then these Santas gang up, and they're ready to throw down. Arnold is
oh my God.
surrounded. And what does Arnold do? He picks up one big ass candy cane and he starts throwing down.
Well, first, before I mention this, $300, December of 1996, as of November of 2024, which is as far as I can go in this, that would be
Man,
$596.77,
Biden
which
inflation,
is
am I right?
insane. But so first he grabs, so Jim Belushi does a very Arrested Development-esque chicken impersonation, as he tells Arnold to hit him. And he's like, "What, are you going to hit me?" And then he's like, "Cheep, cheep, cheep." And then finally, Arnold grabs his beard, snaps him in the face with it. In a perfect slapstick sequence, he stands straight up on his head and bounces back up to hit his head on a pole. And then we get this Santa showdown. First, we get Nunchuck Santa, who screams like Jar Jar Binks jumping into the waters of Naboo. And then he uses this candy cane to dispatch of him and like 10 other Santa Clauses. But then we get Big Show Santa Claus. Well, it's a big show. He shows up. Actually, the Big Show, everybody who's a wrestling fan. This is, at the time, it was WCW's The Giant. Many know him now as the Big Show or Paul White. Gigantic Santa Claus shows up. And if you notice, his hands are like twice the size of Arnold Schwarzenegger's, which is crazy. Arnold's a big dude. Um, and they have a very funny showdown. One of the other famous moments of this movie is in this sequence. So Big Show Santa knocks down Arnold, which is when Vern Troyer, Mini Me, jumps on his shoulders and begins attacking his head.
Yeah, Arnold, yeah.
Uh, and as the Big Show is about to put an end to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Arnold ducks down and Vern Troyer gets launched 50 feet from a Big Show punch. Big Show very sadly says, "Little buddy," before getting his ass kicked. And then a police raid happens
And then Arnold
almost immediately after
gets out of this
by
by
impersonating a
by
fucking police officer.
because there was a badge. I wasn't clear about this. There was just a badge lying
It,
among
it was a
the
it was a
toys.
bin of badges, so like fake toy badges, and he just grabbed one of them.
Oh, it was a toy badge.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so he gets out of that situation, and nobody's like, "Oh, I didn't know we were working with fucking Austrian police department." And he escapes, and his car breaks down, and
Yeah.
there's this really sad shot of Arnold having to push his
Yeah.
car across the bridge.
But see, this is where that moment starts to turn, where like he has at this point, like, yeah, he impersonated a police officer, but like a very minor crime as far as like you're gonna hate the guy, you know? Like, you're not just gonna hate somebody simply for impersonating a police officer. It's what they do while doing that. And you start to feel bad for him at this point, in my mind, because the slapstick nature for him, um, doesn't start up again until you're not supposed to feel bad for him anymore, because we get another slapstick sequence coming up. At this point, like, he's dejected. He hasn't found a Turbo Man doll. He's been to every store. He's been everywhere. And now he's just trying to get to the parade in time. He just wants to keep his promise. Um, but
But this is when he calls home and he
yes,
gets
he
Jake
does
Lloyd
call
on the
home.
phone.
And he's trying to once again, uh trying to save face and say he'll be late. He wants to talk to his mom. What do you think of this sequence with this phone call?
it's doing a lot of heavy lifting right now. Like we've just come from a truly off the rails sequence, and I mean that as a compliment. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna have to switch modes from farce slapstick to this very the sad conversation with his son where he blows up at his kid
Blows up
uh,
back.
blows up back
Yeah.
in the way that little kids do, just says, you never do anything that you say that you're going to do. Um and the only thing that's hard is that these actors aren't in the scene together. It's a phone
Yeah.
call.
Yeah.
And I think this would have been very difficult logistically. I just think the scene would have benefited from them actually interacting with each other. But the phone call, it accomplishes what it's set out to do. The stakes are raised because not only is Arnold not going to get his kid this gift, he's probably going to be late for the parade. He might miss it.
Can
And
I inject one disagreement with you there?
do it, buddy. We're
I
here to
think
fight.
I think the phone I think the phone call actually works better, and I'll explain why. I feel like it eases into the moment with one last joke that both works as a funny moment and as a breaking point, because the phone allows for the miscommunication that I think that I'm going to highlight here, where when he first gets on the phone, Jamie answers right after, so they're all out petting the reindeer,
Oh
which
yeah, Ted has a
Ted,
reindeer.
Ted bought a reindeer for his son. His son has named the reindeer Ted after his dad. Very important. And says, "Hey, maybe your folks should get divorced because my dad started getting me stuff when they got divorced." And that makes Jamie sad because he just wants his mom and dad to be happy, and he wants his dad to come through and be a good father. Walks into the house as the phone is ringing and answers the phone, talk to his dad. So he says, "Hey Jamie, can you put your mother on the phone?" And he goes, "Can't. She's next door petting Ted." And he goes, "She's what?" And it's funny, but it also acts as, it's a miscommunication, and it acts as a final moment of like, I can't do this anymore. Like this day has been too much. My wife is now, he thinks he's being cheated on, or that Ted's moving in on his wife, which he's right. He is moving in on his wife. And it acts as a perfect like final moment, so that when Jamie says, Turbo Man says you should keep your promises and does the quote, which I like that he does it in the voice. Like that's such a
Mhm.
kid thing,
Yeah.
to always keep your promises if you want to keep your friends. And
But Arnold,
finally,
he's had it up to here
I've
with
had it up
Turbo
to
Man.
here with Turbo Man.
I'm not even gonna try doing an impersonation because
He's
I
oh, it's
I I
and
leave
it
that to you.
and he did it really well. I think like he it's a believable like father blowing up at his kid. Like it's not too far, but it's far enough that's like this kid didn't deserve that. And I know you've had a bad day, but you don't take that out on your kid. And
And the bad day is his fault.
oh yeah, I mean it's all his fault. None of this would have happened if he would have just, and I know, as somebody who worked a job that was very demanding for a long time, like I know both how you could speak to someone that you love in your phone voice. I've done it a few times where I'm like, I answer my phone when my wife is calling me and I'm, "Thank you for hello." you know,
Yeah.
um
No, something I
but
really did start to appreciate about this movie is that it is about how the commercialization of Christmas. It's not just it's, we don't just dislike it because, well, it's just overt commercialization over what should be a sacred day for people,
right.
but because it distracts us from what it's really about, which is spending time with our loved ones and appreciating our
Yeah.
loved ones for each other, and not for the things that we buy each other,
Yeah.
right? So he has that phone call. It like it works. Like I'm with the movie. Nothing so far has just fallen flat
And
for
it
me.
lets the mom have a reason to be more upset now too, without forcing it, because she doesn't even speak with him, but she sees how upset Jamie
Yeah,
is. She hears that. what Jamie says back,
Rita
which
Wilson, yeah,
yeah,
she's getting increasingly more disappointed in Arnold Schwarzenegger. She has good reason, not as
very
good of
good.
a reason as Maria Shriver did, but
No.
but a very understandable, rational reason. And
Uh,
I like
yeah.
that she is not the bitchy wife. Like at no point
No.
did she annoy me. And look, that's a problem that a lot of guys have when we're watching films, is that we relate to the husband, even though we can know in a rational sense that what they've done is wrong, but we still,
Right.
a lot of us have this instinct of getting defensive on their behalf when the wife starts criticizing them.
Well, that
And
could be forced a lot too. I mean, there's so
mhm,
many movies that just like he does one thing wrong and it's like, okay, I'm sure we saw stuff before this, but like you didn't explain it. She just
yeah,
like all of a sudden hates him, you know?
but I think there's a critical component to this that, like, Breaking Bad is probably the most famous example, and
You are the
people,
only person who has ever done
what,
who
I'm
has
the only
ever
person.
we're talking about Jingle All the Way. You just brought up Breaking Bad.
Well,
I
let
love
me
it.
let
I
me
love
go
what you're
somewhere with
doing.
this. Let me go.
I love it.
That's another series about a man who prioritizes his career over his family, by the way.
Yeah.
So, famously,
Oh shit.
people hate Skylar, and a lot of people think that's pure misogyny. She's just a woman who realizes that her husband is a monster, a criminal, a terrible person,
Yeah.
and she she reacts accordingly, like how any of us would.
Right.
Um, but there is this factor here where I just don't think that the performance of Skylar White is intrinsically empathetic. I don't think that's how the
It's
actress
fair.
was directed. I don't think that's how the character was written. Because she just has her own motivations, and uh, there's a disconnect between me and Skylar White. But that really can't be said for Rita Wilson's performance here. I think
Hmm.
she it gives a very real, and relatable performance here, and I felt for her as much as I felt for Arnold.
Honestly, more so, and
Honestly, more so. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it.
what helped me here is that there's still that relatability from us guys because like we've all there's still a societal pressure which I do think is somewhat deserved. It just depends on the situation. Sometimes I think it's overdone, sometimes not, but to be a responsible provider, that's what you're supposed to be in a lot of people's eyes, and it's something Arnold is still trying to do. He's not balancing it well. So there is this feeling bad for him. There's things that he does that you're like, all right, like, dude, just be real. Like, just quit being a fucking, you're just fucking lying now.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that extra bit that makes it, work for the slapstick stuff. But what works for me with her is that the movie never um sort of baits itself into her buying into anything Ted is saying. That's where I think it would have taken that moment where like if there's going to be a moment that we'll talk about in a few minutes here about them sitting in a car together where Ted really starts laying it on thick and she rejects it. She rejects his advances. And if she would have like started to buy into it at all or like for a split second was like, oh, but there's a moment in a second that we'll talk about here where she does it again, and she never for once questions the relationship she's in. She's just disappointed in her husband. And that's something a lot of movies would have taken their own bait on that and would have been
Mm-hmm.
like, there's just a split second where the wife is like, oh, well, maybe. But they didn't do that here. And she had good reason to,
No, I
the
think
moment we're about to talk about. But
she acts as an audience surrogate, which
yeah,
is not really the function that the wives usually play in movies, with male leads.
yeah,
Honestly, it's pretty hard to tell what the screenwriters have in mind for those characters, other than usually they're obstacles. And that's the thing. Skylar White is
yes,
framed as an obstacle.
yeah,
She's one of many obstacles that Walter White faces.
Yeah.
She's not our surrogate. We don't see the story through her eyes, or we don't we just don't feel the emotional weight of it through her character.
Yes.
But when Rita Wilson realizes how much Arnold has hurt little Jamie Lloyd on the phone, and she says, "Damn you, Howard." That really punctuates the scene. That she voices our disappointment at Howard, but she hasn't given up on him by that point. He
Yeah.
really starts to push it later, but it's it's good. It's very quietly not misogynistic, which I
Mhm.
appreciate. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree there. And so our next slapstick sequence is involving a radio station. So after getting off the phone, blowing up on his kid, Arnold takes a little bit of time to
have a
have
drink
some
with
coffee.
Sinbad.
He goes for coffee originally in this little diner, but then Sinbad shows up. Peace, 'tis the season to be jolly, which I really like that. And we get this really cool sequence that's like both a comedy moment and a moment where like the lessons of the movie really start to like show through, where it's like Arnold's motivations
Mm-hmm.
are now going away from the whole commercialization thing. It's not about, the toy, and it's just about the principle of you made a promise to your kid and you need to keep it. And if you don't, you could really let your kid down and send that kid on a path that you don't want the kid to be on. And it's told in a very funny way through through Arnold seeing his son as, and I'm having a hard time not saying Jamie Lloyd because it's Jake Lloyd, and the character's name is Jamie,
Have I
but
been
I don't.
calling him Jamie Lloyd this whole time? I think I
No, I think
have.
you've been saying Jake Lloyd. I don't know. If you
No,
have,
I
it's
think I
been
have.
over my head. Jamie Lloyd, another great character, but not this one. But Yeah, he sees his son as Sinbad, having a drink,
Jake Lloyd, yeah.
and he is snapped out of it when they hear on the radio that there is a contest to win a Turbo Man doll. And you have to name all of Santa's reindeer, be the first caller to do it, which there's no way in hell in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that not one person called in before they got to that radio station. But first he tries to call. Sinbad rips the phone off the wall, and the guy behind the counter says, "Well, the radio station's right down the road."
Like, thank
So,
you. Yes, that's how that works.
so
They want you
yeah,
to show up there
yeah.
in,
Which
in the
which I like
costume.
that they didn't just like accept it, Like there's a really funny sequence they build off of that, but they start running and we get this really funny moment where like Sinbad's running quite slowly behind Arnold, who's coasting, saying the name of the reindeer on repeat. And Sinbad realizes he's running too slow, so he starts shedding weight by throwing mail out of his mail bag, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
And finally, they get to the radio station, and Arnold literally breaks into radio DJ Martin Mull. Arrested Development fans will know him as Gene Parmesan, my favorite character from that entire series. Um, but he's one of those guys who just kind of pops up everywhere. He did for a long time. He just passed away this year, which sucks. Another guy who was very talented, taken too soon. Um, but as he frantically relays the name of these reindeer, Sinbad shows up and says, "He can't win. I have a bomb." Um, and
Because
he's
this was in the era
yeah,
of the Unabomber. So
yes, yeah,
that's a risky joke to
it
be making in
is.
your family Christmas movie.
Some people would argue too soon, I think, in
Maybe. I mean,
'96. Yeah.
imagine if like this movie comes out in 2003 and Sinbad says he can't win or else I'm going to fly this plane into the Twin Towers.
Or like, like if somebody would have made a joke about like the like one from our like where we were able to watch it happen and comprehend everything, the Boston bombings, or like
Yeah.
Columbine. If somebody right after Columbine was like, I'm gonna bring I shouldn't even talk about this at the time we're recording. An actual tragedy happened literally yesterday.
In
But
Wisconsin.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Like it could have easily been distasteful. I do think they ultimately did it in a funny and tasteful way because it's not.
I might have to contest that with one
That's fair.
specific choice they make. I would have agreed with you all the way up
The actual
until
bomb?
this gag climaxes, until the actual
Okay.
bomb, and more specifically, this movie takes the tragedy of the Unabomber bombings and translates it into a Tom and Jerry cartoon with a
Yeah,
man
but
with smut all over his face and
I
his
don't
hair
know,
is all
man.
frizzy.
I kind of appreciated that. It took a very like John Hughes approach to it. And what I mean by that is like in John Hughes movies that he both wrote and directed, there's this cartoon nature to them. I mean, like Home Alone, there are moments in that where like those guys should have easily been dead, but they're not.
Yeah.
Home Alone 2, there is literally a moment where Marv is being electrocuted and turns into a skeleton.
Yes.
Planes,
And
Trains, and
people
Automobiles, the devil sequence, you know?
legendary. Everything you just said is legendary, but none
Very
of it
much.
is a direct reference to a
That's
tragedy that
fair.
occurred, that affected the whole country.
I'll
Just
say that's fair. Maybe it's a little easier to see nowadays than it would have been in 96. I'll
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
say that.
in
Yeah.
2024, I mean, I wasn't offended by it, and if I didn't know about the
Right.
Unabomber, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have thought twice about it. Although
Yeah.
then it would have been a really random joke.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So he threatens the bomb, he drops it, and it's a music box. Police show up though because Martin Mull called the police before Arnold broke in, and when the police show up, he pulls the bomb thing again with a different package. And he delivers this really funny line. He says, "I work for the postal service, so you know I'm crazy." Or no, so you know I'm unstable, is what he says, and they ask Arnold, and he says, believe him, he has a bomb.
One of
Uh,
Arnold's best line deliveries of the whole
yeah.
movie. This man is
Oh
totally
yeah. Oh
unstable.
yeah. This man is totally unstable. And then they both escape as a benefit to this, but as soon as they make it outside, the bomb actually explodes and blows up the police officer from earlier, who does have this nice little moment with Arnold, very short in the hallway going to the stairs. You just can't stay out of trouble, can you? Um, Bomb blows him up. Very Tom and Jerry. Very Looney Tunes with like when he'd stick his finger in the gun and it would blow back up in Elmer Fudd's face. Very much like that. Um, and then we get an unforgivable sequence in Arnold's character's bit. What would have been unforgivable.
Mhm.
So he goes back to find his
I
car
mean,
is
it still
destroyed.
is.
It's still
In
pretty
real
bad.
life, it would
It's
be.
really bad.
In this movie, it is almost the point of no return. And I like
Almost.
just how I know a lot of people really don't like it when movie heroes get to a really low place. Like I remember we talked about that about Iron Man 2. I think that's one
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
people's
yeah.
chief complaints about that movie. And I like that choice. And I like it here.
I
Okay.
love it here. I
uh,
love it here. He gets his car towed back, right? And he gets back to his house, gets dropped off by the tow truck, and and he sees Phil Hartman putting the star on the top of his tree.
which Arnold always does.
You
He's
don't
very
do
adamant
that.
about it.
And I'll relate to him in this moment. You don't do that.
Yeah.
Like that's my job in my house. If another dude did that, I would threaten physical violence, if not pull physical violence. That's you don't do that to somebody. But you also don't do what Arnold's about to do in a second here.
Also, Rita Wilson comes across very well. I'm going to refer to everybody by
Oh,
their
oh,
by
she
the
did
end.
it really, really well. Yeah,
Yeah, because a lesser movie might have tried to heighten the stakes by letting Rita Wilson start to actually treat Phil Hartman like her husband because she's
exactly.
so disappointed in her actual husband. And that's where you would see a lot of people calling her a bitch, calling her
Yep.
all of that stuff. And not that I would agree with that,
Right.
but this movie it proceeds very wisely because she is very offended when Phil Hartman does it. And she gives
Yeah.
him the benefit of the doubt, but she does not let it slide.
No, she makes him take it down.
Yeah,
So Arnold sees him putting it up there, but as soon as she sees it, by then Arnold is already off to do what we're about to discuss.
yeah,
But
and we
she
have to
makes
talk
him
about
take it
this.
down because so he's so mad and blinded with rage that he begins to hear Phil Hartman's voice from earlier in the movie saying that the Turbo Man doll for Johnny is nestled safely under the tree. So he's going to break into his house and steal his son's Turbo Man doll. And he does exactly that. He breaks into the house, and as he breaks into the house, some carolers show up, and they go outside to watch the carolers. Now, this is another moment where Rita Wilson's character could have gone the wrong way. Phil Hartman puts his arm around her, and she shakes it off very
He's laying it
politely.
on pretty thick by this
He's getting
point.
thicker and thicker as we go. The plot is thickening as we're watching. But she, that's a moment where like an audience you could almost think like, oh, they'd let it slide, right? Like, you could just make her make an uncomfortable face and that's it. But she like quite literally like dances him off, which is really good. I like how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
But as this is happening, Arnold gets the toy and he's like, okay, I can't go out the front because that's where the carolers are. They'll see me. I have to go out the back door. So he goes out the back door, and as soon as he steps out, he realizes what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's stealing a toy from a kid, and I like that he says it out loud to himself because that is very realistic. Like I've done that with myself.
Well,
Like, am I really doing this right
Arnold
now?
has to because he's not going to convey it
I thought
through
his
his
facials were
acting.
pretty good here. I
His
thought his
facials
facials were
were
pretty good.
good, but I think you needed him to say it.
You did.
Um,
There needed to be a little extra.
yeah, yeah. That's where maybe another actor could have, their strength could have been in moments like this, um,
Yeah.
because it almost feels like sometimes Arnold seems like one of those guys who doesn't have an inner monologue. So whatever thought occurs in his head,
Yeah, very
he's
much.
compelled to say it out loud. That's how that moment read to me. But still, it's okay. Good. He didn't actually go through with this robbery, but he realizes his lesson too late
Yeah, a little too
because
late. The reindeer shows
Ted
up.
the reindeer
Yeah,
was in the
Ted's back.
back, and lets loose and goes on a rampage, chasing Arnold through the house. And this is where I think the art of this kind of comedy has been a little diluted. There was something about watching Arnold actually um, uh, being chased throughout this house and creating all this havoc on a real set
Yes, a practical reindeer.
and so a real reindeer,
Well,
right?
it was clearly like, a puppet
It was
in
a
most
puppet
of the
sometimes.
sequences.
Yeah.
But you have to. You can't really train a deer to do everything they needed, but it looked great on camera.
Yeah. And Arnold accidentally he catches the rug on fire.
Well, he burns a wise man.
I forgot. He burns a wise
Yeah,
man. And the best gag of this, something that actually made me laugh out loud,
was kicking the head out the window.
kicking the head out
Yeah.
and scaring the shit out of the carolers.
Yeah, and Ted like Ted gets scared shitless, and then he starts trying to put the fire out, and he's like, shoveling snow on it, and patting it out. And they look inside, and he's standing in the broken window with the Turbo Man doll. And they go and that is Johnny's Turbo Man. Um,
You can't
I
bench press your way out of this one.
I loved that line. And because it's the first time where we see him like like everything leading up to it is just like, okay, he's an asshole, but like how much of this is just him being naturally an asshole and how much of this is him just hating his neighbor and wanting to get with his wife. This is the moment where it's like, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm moving in on your wife, and I know that now there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And that was just like Phil Hartman did it perfect. His face just, it's the first time you see Phil Hartman like genuinely angry in the movie, and it's perfect. He does it perfectly. Um, and that's an interest, but he starts drinking with the reindeer well, first he punches the reindeer. Once Phil Hartman and Rita Wilson's like, hey, can you take us to the parade, Ted? And he said, absolutely, you know. So absolutely. The reindeer breaks out of the room he's constrained in and is punched by fed up Arnold. Then they drink together. Uh, like with actual fights, at least those that I've experienced, there's a mutual respect after you fight somebody. And you know, sometimes you're closer because of it, and they start drinking alcohol in the back of Ted's house. Um,
And then Arnold realizes that even though he didn't get this doll, what he should really have been doing is spending time with his son.
yep,
And he now the thing he needs to do is make it to this parade. You know,
that's another promise he made.
it's another, and it's the only one he can keep at this point, or so he
Yep,
thinks. And it's the more important one because it's about the actual spirit of Christmas. Gosh darn it!
yep.
So he rushes over there to the Minnesota Christmas parade, which again has this Turbo Man what do you floater.
Yeah, Turbo Man. There is going to be a Turbo Man float there. That's why Jamie's so excited to go. Is Turbo Man's going to be there, and he wants his dad to be there with him when Turbo Man shows up.
Jamie Lord.
And so Arnold does make it to the parade. So we get the sequence basically where and this is very realistic for big city parades. You know, cars will line up at trying to get to parking, and other people, passengers in the car, will usually get out and find a spot to save for the driver. So that's what the kids do. The kids go out to stand, which would not happen today. Literally a couple weeks ago, a lady was arrested for letting her kid walk a mile to a store for child endangerment. So that would not happen today. But it happens here. And Ted sees this as an opportunity to really go for the kill. He goes for the jugular here and starts making advances on Rita Wilson's character, and even calling her Lizzie. And I love her Lizzie. Like she can't believe this is happening. Before she can fend him off, though, Arnold sees her in the car with him, and he's like twirling her hair, and he's about to go fuck him up. if he
Presumably,
hadn't if he hadn't have run directly into the officer who now has his hands all wrapped up from the box explosion
and is still
and
on duty.
spills. He's still working. This cop has my utmost respect now. I know what he
Maybe
did
he's
before.
there to watch the parade.
Maybe, but he's still in uniform. He's got this like pack of 4 coffees, presumably for his fellow officers working the parade, and he spills the coffee all over him. And so Arnold runs away. The cop ends up trying to chase him down and running into a school bus. And he's incapacitated. It lets Arnold escape into this dark and dingy building. And in the dark and dingy building,
This is what y'all are waiting for, right?
he is mistaken for the backup actor for
This is what you
Turbo
came to
Man.
see, right?
Now this is the turning point. This is where the movie goes so far into the slapstick comedy that it's almost a point of no return. I'll say almost because I really want to discuss something about the ending. Now up until this point, I think Arnold has showed us something here. I think he's really shown us something with this performance that he's got a little more depth than people wanted to give him credit for, but he benefits from the movie being written as him in mind for the joke.
Mhm.
Where are you sitting with him at this point before we get to the sequence? Overall, I'd say give him a grade.
A grade. Well, I'm going to grade him on a curve because it's Arnold, and
Of course. Yeah.
I feel like I've come to know Arnold's strengths and his weaknesses, and can balance all of that with his performance. I'm going to give him a solid B. Right. I think
Okay.
if the emotional beats, if I felt like he could really nail those, it could have been an A, because I'm really enjoying all of the slapstick. I'm really enjoying all of the comedy. Really, really nothing's fallen flat with me in that department. Um, but even the dramatic beats become comedy because it's Arnold, and we're never going to get used to hearing how he talks. Uh,
No.
decades and decades and decades later, I think the the only time I can really put that aside is when he delivers those very kind of emotional pleas on Twitter. You know the ones I'm talking about, right? Every time a national tragedy
Yeah.
happens, and he actually talks about his upbringing in post Nazi Austria. It's very emotional. It's very moving. But that's Arnold, the man. Arnold, the actor, has always had to deal with that accent, and not just his accent, but just the
Yeah.
cadence it sticks him to. He just doesn't say things the way us Yankees would. Um, so things that you write for another actor is not going to register the same way when those lines are given to Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is a really long roundabout way of saying that Arnold is really funny in this movie, intentionally and unintentionally so. All right, that's where I'm
That's
at
very
with Arnold.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm somewhere between a B plus and an A minus, honestly, because I know that the script like works really well for him, and I want to give the writer some of that credit because, like you said, most of these lines don't work if it's not Arnold. They just don't. Um,
So you
so
need like a
you know,
James
having a
Cameron, just real quick, like a James Cameron like knows Arnold and has worked with
yeah,
Arnold, so he can really
right.
tailor to Arnold's strengths, and that's why Terminator 2 never has this problem, even though I would argue it's Arnold's most complex performance.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I want to give him an A minus. I think a B plus is where I'll settle because I do think that there are he doesn't do anything wrong per se, but he there are also moments where I do think that like um it played against his strength slightly because it was a little bit more on the emotional side, and I just don't think he's ever been that particularly great in that. He's done it in other movies. He doesn't shine there. He's not bad. Like especially I praised his facials during that sequence where he realizes what he's doing with Johnny's toy. But yeah, I'd say B plus is where I'd probably give him. And then we're here. We're at the parade. He is being stripped to get into a Turbo Man suit. And they're saying these really funny things about how like rehearsal, the original actor was in some sort of accident, and the doctor said he started showing brain activity, which is really good.
A shout
And
out to that guy, whoever that actor was.
yeah, he was perfect for that role. He really shined in his short moment.
Yeah, there are
Uh,
a lot of like um characters with very limited screen time who have these standout moments, which I think
oh
is the
yeah.
mark of a really good comedy.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, there's not a performance that I came away from this, any viewing, especially this one though, because I'm watching it critically,
Mm-hmm.
uh, disliking, or that I feel like
Yeah.
doesn't work towards the movie, which like when everybody's hitting, like you have to appreciate that. And so he still doesn't really know what's going on. We're getting the sense, obviously, as the audience, but he is discombobulated. He was just running from a police officer again. And now he's being stripped and suddenly he's in the costume and he sees Booster, played by Curtis Armstrong here, who is amazing. Anybody who knows me knows my favorite comedy of all time is Better Off Dead. I fucking love that movie. He is a shining example of why. He is another in this movie. I think he's an example of what you just said, of somebody who has a very small role but who absolutely shines. I mean,
Yeah.
he's
Oh,
perfect.
yeah.
He is chain smoking in this suit. You know, it reeks of cigarettes.
And the perfect payoff to this running gag that
Yeah,
kids
yeah.
hate Booster.
The kids hate Booster. We're
He
gonna get
gets,
to what happens to him.
yeah, sure, I'll save it. But Arnold has not taken the time to say, "Hey, I'm not the actor.
No,
I'm not who you think I am." He doesn't know what's going on.
yeah,
But he's been put in a Turbo Man suit. He's been paired with Curtis Armstrong, who's playing Booster, and then he's risen
yeah.
through this platform. And oh shit, he's on the Turbo Man float, and he's Turbo Man.
And I love that moment where you hear the parade commentary team. um,
One of whom is Donna from The Office. Real ones know.
yes. Uh, goes, it's Turbo Man. And then you see this moment of realization where he's like, what? And then
Yeah,
he
those are
starts
the
to see
faces
it.
that Arnold's good at.
Yep. And then he starts to know what's going on, and Curtis Armstrong throughout it sort of like guiding him and like start the pose, wave to people. So he starts to, and he's like, "Hey, I really like this actually. People are cheering for me." So then he starts really hamming it up, and he's doing the poses, and he's you know and then he sees his kid out in the crowd doing the Turbo Man wave or the Turbo Man salute to
So,
him,
yeah.
and he does it back, and then they announce why this float is so special. And from the float, just like he did, rises a special edition out of the box, which is crazy as a collector. Why is it
Yeah.
not in a box? It's a collector's edition.
Yeah.
What are
It's a
you doing?
special edition Turbo Man that he can give to any kid
Any kid.
in the crowd.
Yep. And this is the moment, the one moment turning point where the movie goes a little too far for suspension of disbelief for me, because he's picking a kid. He spots Jamie again because the float's moved a little bit. He spots Jamie again. He's pointing, and Johnny's like, he's pointing at me. Little shit. And he didn't do anything wrong. I'm so sorry.
Honestly,
He
Johnny is one of the nicer fat kids in 90s
no,
movies. Usually fat
yeah,
kids were mean
yeah,
as hell in
a
these
hundred percent,
movies.
100%. But or they're like the victim, right? Like they're the victim of
Or
bullies
they
and
were
stuff.
little
He's
bitches. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It was either mean
but
as shit or little bitches.
so he points, and Johnny's like, no, he's pointing at me. He's pointing at me. And then finally they turn his microphone on, and he goes, Jamie. And it's like, okay, he has to be the only man in Minnesota with that voice, and nobody, not even his son and wife, are like, huh, that kind of sounded like the person we know very well.
Oh, that's the moment it breaks suspension of disbelief, not when he turns on his jetpack later.
This is the first moment.
Oh,
The
the first
bomb
moment.
thing,
Okay.
see, the bomb thing does, but like it does it as much as like a Home Alone. And this movie has sort of established itself to be a very much like slapstick, like zero consequences sort of Home Alone
Look,
type
here's the
movie.
thing you have to suspend your disbelief in every Arnold movie because nobody ever acknowledges that he talks like that.
It's kind of
Nobody.
like it's kind of like Street Fighter, where like Jean-Claude Van Damme is this like all-American boy, and he's like, we have to defend the guy. we have
Yeah, or in
we have to fight the forces of evil.
oh,
Um,
what was that one he did with Dolph Lundgren?
oh,
There,
Universal Soldier. That's a
yeah,
great movie. Yeah,
it's a great movie, and John Claude kicks a lot of ass. But
yeah.
when you meet him as an American troop in the Vietnamese War,
Now, luckily, that one's a little better because at least he has a French name in the movie. He is Luc Devereaux, so he was a French American soldier. So at least they
okay,
they at least they created something. Arnold, they usually don't. They just throw him in like
no, his name
Predator
is
or Commando.
Howard.
I mean, his name is Howard here. But yeah, he calls out the Jamie, and and Jake Lloyd comes walking on the float, and he gets the toy, and he goes,
No, I
"How did
believe
you
that
know my name?"
canonically, I don't think Arnold ever has an Austrian accent in these movies. I believe he's to be treated as
Is
if
the
he
audience
sounds.
hearing the accent, not the people in the
I'm not
movie?
even kidding. I think we are to treat Arnold in these movies as if he sounds like a regular person,
The
like an
film,
American.
the filmmakers are like, "You what accent? I don't know. I don't hear anything."
Because okay, real talk, in most cases, if Arnold Schwarzenegger were to say something to you, if he were to say, I'll be back, you would say, I'm sorry, what now? Like, what? I'm sorry, I
Dude, you know
didn't
what? But it's
understand that.
also
What?
like he's got the most recognizable voice in America. Like I think if my mother came up behind me in a store and said my name, I would have a harder time thinking that it's her behind my back than I would if Arnold Schwarzenegger came up behind me and said, "Hey, buddy, watch out." I'd be like, "Oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger's behind me. What the fuck?" He is the most recognizable
To
voice
our ears, but
ever.
I
That's the.
think
I think
across
you're right.
his entire filmography, we like imagine in True Lies, imagine that the CIA actually were to hire a man who looked and sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger as a secret agent.
I think you're right. Oh my god, have I been watching every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie wrong? The voice is in our heads. It makes sense in the story because it's not there.
If Arnold
Holy shit.
Schwarzenegger were to say anything to you in real life, your reaction would not be, oh my God, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. It'd be like, I'm sorry, what? I have no idea what you're saying. What did you,
I'm sorry.
what?
Sorry, I can't understand what you're saying, sir. Oh my God. No, I am gonna watch every movie differently now, so thank you for that. But yeah, so he calls Jake Lloyd up. Jake Lloyd comes walking onto the float, and this is after he's like, he knows my name. And he goes
And
up there. How did
not Jake Lloyd's best line reading in the movie.
No, but it was very very similar to the type of shit he would say in episode 1. So like his strengths at this point.
Yeah.
Um
We know his strengths and his weaknesses.
but he does have a good delivery when he actually gets up there and he's like, "But how did you know my name?" Like that was very kid-like. It was very
Mhm.
inquisitive, kid-like. He did good there.
And
Um
then Arnold is about to say, I'm your
I'm your
father,
father.
which was prophetic.
Well, Jamie, I know because I'm your Well, okay, we didn't introduce that there are these small moments leading up to this where the actor playing the bad guy, I don't even remember what his name was, Sinestro or something. No, well, not Sinestro. That's a DC character.
You mean Turbo Man's villain?
Yes, I can't remember.
I'm gonna call him Megamind because that's what he
Okay,
reminded me
so
of.
the actor playing Megamind gets attacked and tied up on the roof, and down comes our mailman, who's been there throughout the movie. Myron shows up, and he is trying to get the doll from the kid. So he attempts to. He goes after the kid, and then Jake Lloyd's like, "Hey, use your use your little fancy weapons." And
By the
of
way, at this
course,
point, Sinbad is a terrorist.
oh yeah, I mean he has blown up police officers. He has
He's
clearly
attacked a parade full
he's
of
attacked a
people.
parade. He is going after a child here, and not only terroristic threats but legitimate terrorism. So of course, in the universe of this movie, the suit is fully functional.
Yeah,
It works exactly like it does in the television show.
I think
So
this
he
is where
shoots.
like the vitriol against this movie really comes from. Is this last 20 minutes? I feel like
I'm
there because there's this disgusted tone that I read in reviews of this movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I didn't understand where that came from until that last 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll discuss a little bit further in my final verdict
And
about
I'm
how
not
I
saying I
feel about
agree
that.
with
Yeah,
the
right. We're
discuss. I'm
just
just
we're
saying I
saying that
understand
that's
you're
a
watching
moment
this
where
movie.
yeah.
Roger Ebert's reviewing Arnold Schwarzenegger's family Christmas movie. He's writing down his notes and he looks up and he's like, "What the shit?"
Dude.
like Arnold starts flying like the Rocketeer, and he somehow doesn't, flatten his head as he flies into skyscraper after skyscraper.
Yeah. Yeah, this goes a little off the rails here. So this fully functional suit, he shoots these metal discs into Mega into Sinbad's head. Sinbad falls down, and it seems like he saved the day. But the other people in the float don't know what's going on. So they continue and they go after Arnold, these little like very Power Rangers-esque minion characters. Now we did forget one thing. When Sinbad first shows up, Curtis Armstrong as Booster says this is not in the script. And and Sinbad goes, "Shut up, Booster. Nobody likes you." And he punches Booster off of the float, which is bad enough. And then children swarm and begin beating Booster on the fucking ground. They beat the shit out of this guy. They're cheering on this deranged mailman who just attacked this man. It's
It is trying to
hilarious though.
abduct a child, you know?
Yes, he's trying to abduct the he, nobody likes you, Booster. And he punches him off the float. It's amazing. And the kids attacking him is just so much better because it is the perfect crescendo to the everybody hates Booster joke.
Yeah.
Where kids are literally dogpiling on him.
Yeah, that's
Um,
another hallmark of really well thought out comedies. I mentioned having these characters, these day players who still make a really strong impression, have time to
yeah.
shine. That's one hallmark, and the other is actual payoff to these
Yep.
running gags. Because I mean, it's funny enough. Everybody hates Booster. It just you know, it never failed to amuse me,
Yeah.
and it could have been left at that. And then they actually did pay it off in a fashion that was proportional to the amount of times they referenced it, which
Yeah.
very rarely happens.
Which is literally children beating the shit out of this injured actor. And
And
it's
you know,
so
the fact
good.
that it's Curtis Armstrong
Oh
is the
yeah.
cherry on
Oh
top.
yeah. It's so good. It's so good. And then so the sequence continues, these minions attack him and Myron chases Jake Lloyd off the float. And Jake Lloyd, the hero that he is, also equally a troublemaker in this movie as he is in episode 1. Climbs a building to get away from this guy. And we get
And
some
he's
really funny Sinbad moments here.
we get some funny Sinbad moments, and then Jake Lloyd all of a sudden says, "Now this is pod racing." I didn't understand. Do you know why he said that? Did I miss? Did
Yeah,
I
you
miss
know,
something?
I don't remember pod racing in the movie up until that point, but he did, dude, clear
It
as
made
day.
more sense when he said it in the Phantom Menace
It
because
did no.
he had
Well,
been pod
I
racing. I just
never realized that the Phantom Menace was calling back to Jingle All the Way,
Do
but
you think that George Lucas got the idea for pod racing from Jingle All the Way? I
I
think
mean, he
that
would
could
have
have
had
planted the
to.
seeds. Yeah.
I think he's a fucking thief. That's what I think now.
Well,
Um,
unironically, yes.
but no, okay, well, all right. But anyways, he gets on top of the roof, and as Sinbad's climbing up there, he's like very calmly like, "Come on, kid, I'm afraid of heights. Ain't you? Haven't you seen Vertigo?"
Does
He
that
goes,
mean
"That's how I'm
anything
feeling
to
right."
you?
Does that mean anything to you? Uh, and then Jake Lloyd's on the roof, and he's like, he has this villain moment. End of the line, kid. Give me the doll. And Jake Lloyd says never and begins climbing a Christmas tree scaffolding structure on top of this
Well,
building.
it's a sign, right?
It's like a sign. Yeah, it's like a metal sign. It's you used to see these a lot more frequently than you do now. Like when we were kids, you could see these still, and it's basically
Yeah, it's
just
this
metal
neon
piping.
sign. It's
Yeah.
it's the building's sign.
Yeah.
They climb to the top of it.
They
Then
wrapped it
it's
in tinsel.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then it tips over, and they're hanging on.
Yes.
Sinbad and Jake Lloyd are hanging on, and Arnold cannot figure out how this jetpack works to save his life or his
Yeah.
son's life.
Well, he tries to save his life
He
first when they
does,
get
yeah.
when they first get to the roof, and he flies up into the air, flies around Minneapolis, goes through a family's Christmas dinner, uh, which is actually I really like how they did that sequence where he flies through. You just see him just kind of like float over, and the whole room is just engulfed in this wind that lifts everybody and everything up. Then he flies full speed into a building and sticks like they would in cartoons. They even do the sound effect, that like wooden, like,
Yeah.
yeah, everybody knows what I'm talking about if they see it's almost like a diving board sound. And then he goes full speed into the ground. Now he's got to figure out this jetpack thing very quickly because his son at this point, like you said, they are now dangling off of this thing. So first, as they're dangling, Myron's trying to get the toy out of Jake Lloyd's backpack, and he uses a boomerang, and it flies past him. And not knowing what a boomerang is, Sinbad goes, "Ha! You missed me!" and pulls it out of the kid's bag. Then it comes back and hits him, and he falls. Seemingly, at first, you're like, "Oh my god, he's gonna die!" But it's a Christmas movie, so he lands on a big present. Um,
And he gets arrested and will
Gets arrested.
go to jail for the rest of his life.
Certainly. Although his punishment will be less because I do believe that Arnold and his kid will not press charges for the atrocities committed
Do
against
you
them.
think the city of
Um,
Minneapolis might press charges for those bomb threats?
You know what? Like, I want to talk about the implications of the actions of this movie afterwards, because I think it's really important. Because there's a lot to take in here. But the police surround him with guns as he has the toy, and now Jake Lloyd, his grip slips off of this sign, and he begins to plummet. And just like at the beginning of the movie, when Turbo Man in the episode Jamie was watching, it gets saved. Turbo Man saves the president's kid who's falling off a cliff. Arnold gets to save his son as he plummets to his death, and he does save him, much to the chagrin of evil internet episode one fans. Jake Lloyd survives this movie, and is carried to the ground. And there's this moment right here where we go to this like really sweet sentimentality where he returns him to his mother, and and he gives this really funny "there you go, ma'am." um and Jake Lloyd has this really nice moment, and it's a good acting moment from him too, where he talks about how he wishes his dad could have been there.
Yeah.
And even in this moment where like he just all of his dreams just came true, right? He was saved by Turbo Man. He got to go through this big action chase, and he's okay, and he's back to his mom. All he can think about is that he wishes his dad, his real hero, was there with him.
Can I admit
And
something that's very hard for me to confess?
uh-oh.
I got a little teary eyed at that. I got
Dude,
a little
okay.
teary eyed at that.
Let me you're don't be embarrassed because I'm about to say something too as we go through this. But he's talking about how he wishes his dad could have been there. And then on top of it, they go the extra mile. It's not just that he wishes his dad was there. He now doesn't care about the promise. All he cares about is that he yelled at his dad on the phone. And he feels so sad that he yelled at
He
his dad.
he thinks he's the reason his dad didn't show up
Yes.
because he yelled at his dad, which is a
And
total kid thing to
yes,
think.
and it's so well done too, and like the words he say, like it's everything you would actually hear a kid say in a situation like that. And he's talking about how sad he is, and he's like, and now Dad's mad at me, and it's all my fault, and he hates me. And Arnold, he doesn't hate you. He loves you more than anything in the world. And and Rita Wilson at this moment is like, that kind of sounds like the only Austrian man in the entire state of Minnesota. That sounds like the guy I married. And she's confused. And Jake Lloyd's like, "How do you know?" And he goes, "Well, who would know better then?" And he takes the helmet off and he goes, "Me." And Dad. And I love the Rita Wilson. She's Howard. She's surprised, and then Howard because he's in the big muscle suit and he looks good in the muscle suit. I
That's
love
the
that
first
part.
time that she noticed that what a rock and
Right.
bod her
Yeah.
husband has.
Rock and bod. And he did just save the day. So there is part of
Yeah.
that there too.
Yeah.
But then we get the moment that made me teary eyed. And over the years has made me increasingly teary eyed because after that sequence, which already got me in my feels, I'm not quite teary eyed yet. The kid hears Myron going by, and let's be real about something. This is a moment where we have to be real about this character. Unhinged, absolutely. Terrorist, 100%. But all of it was in pursuit of not being the disappointment that his father was. And you have to commend him for that because everybody's got a little unstable side to them. I know I've had moments.
He has a solid motivation.
Yes, and at this moment he goes from this slapstick character like to this sort of sympathetic where it's like kind of still funny, but Jake Lloyd stops everything and runs up to him as he's being, swept away and gives him the toy. And I think what works perfectly here is Sinbad's delivery. Like he almost can't believe that this kid did it and he's just kind of like, "Wow, like thank you. My son's going to be real happy." And there's this moment where you feel like that character knows he's going to jail. He knows he's in trouble, right? But he still gets to give his kid that toy he really wanted. He still gets to be a little bit of a good dad. And it's like, dude, I watched it this time and I was like, all right, okay, Jingle All The Way is doing it. I guess this is happening. And it was really, really well done and a really sweet, surprisingly sweet ending to now. Of course, the post credit sequence is coming, so it's not quite the end. Um, but really sweet way to cap off this story.
And it was really
Everybody's learned
interesting.
their lesson.
It was really interesting that the, I guess, main critique or the reputation of this movie is that it's a toy commercial for a toy that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
that it is really emblematic of, the consumer greed of the time. But the ending totally contradicts that. And I
A
was
hundred
really
percent.
surprised. I mean, is it schmaltzy? Maybe on the face of it, but
Yeah.
when you look at the structure of the film and the arcs of all these characters and what they want versus what they need, like there's some real screencraft. There's some
Yeah. Oh
screenwriting.
yeah.
There's a real understanding of all of these themes and elements that you need for a solid screenplay. And I don't know, it was really interesting to see a movie that was billed as one thing, end on a completely different note, like a note that contradicts that, makes me think that people checked out
Yeah.
after a certain point and stopped giving the movie a chance, probably after um, the turbo main sequence really started jumping the shark, which it does. I wouldn't have it any other way, but objectively speaking, it does.
Yeah. I love that whole sequence, I'll be
Yeah.
honest. I
No,
have
I
to be
wouldn't have it
honest
any
here.
other way,
It's
to be honest.
amazing.
Yeah.
But I read a review that sort of like it sort of acknowledges what you just said there, but then it is like, and then the movie gives it all away when the kid says, I have the real Turbo Man at home. Because at the end of the day, he's not idolizing his father, he's idolizing this. But like, that's
Yes,
not the
he is
point of that
idolizing
line.
his father. That's the whole.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's not, it like that review bothered me so much. I was going to leave a comment, but I was like, well, maybe I'll just bring it up on the show. And I want to talk about it here because um, he's saying it not in a way of saying like, oh well, my dad's Turbo Man, so that's why he's cool. Like his dad is cool because he not only did he keep his promise, he saved his life, and he literally dressed as this kid's favorite character. Like, I know he's got Captain America on his wall, but like Turbo Man's the dude for this guy. His dad gave him everything he could have wanted without buying him a single present. And that's the whole point of this. His dad is his hero. I just I don't know, man. That review made me. It's like you didn't even watch the movie.
Or you wanted to shit on the movie and
Yes, that's true too.
retooled things to meet that. Uh,
Yeah, either you
so
didn't understand it or you're malicious. There's no in between.
yeah, and that's I didn't see the post credit scene. So for me, that's where the movie ends. Oh, and
Okay.
Phil Hartman shows back up briefly. He has
Yeah.
eggnog all over his face.
And his kid's
And
like, you smell like bar.
but even better, he's like, "What's going on?" And the kid's like, "Oh, Jamie's dad is Turbo Man." And Ted,
He
realizing
shits
that he
himself.
just he just hit on Turbo Man's wife, he's like, "All right, we gotta go."
Yeah. Yeah, let's get out of here. It's perfect. It's very, very movie villain esque, when let's get out of here. Batman villain almost like animated series has a lot of that where it's like, oh, it's the bat, let's go. Yeah, very let's get out of here. And he pulls Johnny away, and Johnny's like, hey dad, I want to stay. It's really good, really, really funny. And yeah, very sweet ending. There is a post-credit sequence. I choose to ignore it. But I have to bring it up because it will ultimately be a complaint. Um, so they're standing there Christmas morning, and Rita comes up and gives Arnold a hug and says, man, you went through all this trouble just to get Jamie a present. I can't wait to see what you got me. And Arnold makes the
Oh,
scared face at the
uh,
camera,
uh-huh.
and it zooms in at him just like it did earlier with Turbo Man bit. Uh that undoes a lot of goodwill. But again, it's not part of my viewing experience anymore. I know it's coming. I don't watch it. I watched it this time, so I could fairly grade it and say that undoes the sweetness of the ending.
Really
But
does.
ultimately, like I don't hold that against the movie too much because, like most people, that's where their experience ends is the actual ending of the movie. So that's where I'm going to choose to
Yeah, I'm
acknowledge it
kind
up.
of to the point of not acknowledging post credit scenes, like not accepting them as canon.
They are annoying as fuck. I'm sorry. They are. They annoy the shit out of me.
Like, I don't know if the original Iron Man knows what an atom bomb it created. Um, with that post credit scene being as much of a crowd pleaser as it was.
Now, that said, I don't mind credit Easter eggs. Like
That's fine.
episode one at the end of it, there the Darth Vader breath is heard. I think that's cool as
That's a
shit.
totally different thing. That's a
That's what I
totally
mean.
different
Like,
thing.
and
Yeah.
like there are times where credits will include things like a couple of there was a Conjuring movie that like showed a flash of Annabelle to tease that Annabelle was going to be the next movie during their
Mm-hmm.
credits. Like stuff like that. Like I appreciate, but like
To me, I
it's
see
almost
that
become
that's the same thing as Back to the Future 2 playing the trailer for Back to the Future 3 at the end.
yeah, yeah,
That's
that's
it's the
kind of
same
fair.
thing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not a scene. It's not part of the story. Back to the
it's a
Future 2
teaser.
has ended
Yes,
effectively.
it's a teaser, and in this movie, it just there's nothing that it serves other than just that. It almost felt like when people show like a blooper at the end of the credits. It's like that's what it felt like to me. So I
Right.
don't, if that's if you hate this movie so much that that's a reason that you're not gonna like it, like all power to you. But most people are gonna check out at the ending. That's when they're gonna end it. Especially now streaming services. As soon as it hits the credits. The window is going to shrink to the upper 2/3 of the screen, and it's going to say, "Here's another movie for you to watch," and people are going to click it or they're going to back out, whatever they do. For me, I just take the disc out. But yeah, we've reached the end of the movie. And that's it. That's Jingle All the
That's Jingle
Way.
All the Way.
So I feel like there's nothing else for us to do but to give our final verdicts on the movie and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of raise our final thoughts. And I guess I'll start with you here as the person who's never seen the movie before. You were familiar with it. You had somewhat of an expectation going into the movie, and on top of that, you had knowledge of everybody else's
Yeah.
feelings about it. So how did you come out of this?
I have to establish just how low my expectations were. I was not looking forward to watching this movie.
I want to give a peek behind the curtain to everybody real quick. There have been a few times that this movie's been brought up, and almost every time it's been met with a sigh and that right there, the shaking of the head.
And I think actually, because my wife watched this with me, um, and as I pressed play, I said the words, "Damn Connor for making me watch this."
No, I got another movie that you can say that for later.
Okay. So
Oh
to be
boy.
fair, I went in with very low expectations, which is going to make it far easier for the movie to impress me. It
Yeah.
just has to meet a baseline level of quality, which it did. Um, and the things that don't quite work about it kind of transcend the, let's say, actual subpar quality on the face of it and gels with the rest of the elements of the movie. That's kind of the great thing about filmmaking. There are no hard rules. So
Yeah.
if you have an actor that maybe is miscast by a certain definition, you know, a clever director, um, a good supporting cast, and just the right script can actually like completely redefine it and make that one of the best parts of the movie. And watching Arnold was a delight from beginning to end. So this movie represented more things to me than just a star vehicle for Arnold Schwarzenegger. It really surprisingly touched on topics that I think about a lot come the Christmas season. The way that the holidays actually brings out the ugliest of people, the way that things that I love as a child have been revealed to me as tools of marketing and consumption, and how to reconcile that with the genuine affection I have for those very hood childhood memories, and how Christmas isn't pure in the sense that it's the family oriented, values oriented holiday that a lot of people wish it was, but these things kind of rise above each other to amount to something that I don't know is flawed, but somehow the flaws make it more endearing. Like after the hassle and the chaos of shopping and traveling, you know, we basically go through hell and back just to spend time with our families. And in the end, it's always worth it,
Yeah.
if you're with the people you love. So in a way, I mean, this movie is kind of better than I could have hoped for. Like that it achieved something like that is quite remarkable. Um, but I'm also going to temper things because there are flaws I acknowledge with the film, and I feel like a lot of my own personal feelings about the holidays are are what this review is really about more than my critical analysis of the film. But hey, man, I got to give it an actually good, and
Ooh.
I'm closer to giving it an actually great than I am a not that bad.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So you started this process cursing my name and ended
cursing your
it with an
name.
actually good. I'll
Yeah,
take that.
no, it's like you pull out a lump of coal from your stocking, and then you hit it with a hammer, and then there's like there's actually a nice present underneath. I was gonna say a
Oh.
diamond. It's not exactly a diamond, but it's um maybe like a uh what am I reaching for here? Like a really nice pair of socks or something.
Oh, okay. All
Socks
right.
are a great present now that I'm, an old man.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, I'm happy to hear it. Of course, this was a movie that I brought to the fold. So for me, I don't know how you feel when you do this stuff, but there's this almost sense of like nervousness that I get when I bring a movie, because it's like it could go one of two ways. Okay, we've had movies in the past that haven't done very well on the show, and we've had movies that have done very well. And bringing a movie like this was especially kind of a um, pretty nerve-inducing, I'll say, not quite nerve-wracking, but nerve-inducing experience because this was a childhood staple for me. I mean, like this was something I watched year after year, sometimes several times, during the Christmas season. Um, and it was always very, very special to me. And it's sort of not as I've gotten older, sometimes it gets harder to watch a lot of movies around the holidays. You just get busy, a lot of things happen. I know this year especially, things have been absolutely crazy in my world. And so getting an opportunity to watch this again was special. I said, at least I can take that away from this. But I took more away from this. I would have said a lot different things, but I'll say this: I cannot fathom how anybody could hate this movie. It isn't in my. I don't get it. While there are sequences that certainly take you out of some of the nice things that the movie is trying to do, some of the good deeds that it handles, for me, it absolutely adds to the comedic value of the movie. Nothing in this film does not work for me. This is not quite certified Christmas classic at the level of like for me, the top three are always going to be Home Alone 2. That's not my favorite. My favorite is How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey. And right next to them is Scrooged. Those are my big three Christmas movies that I think I'd put up there with just great movies. This is, though, I feel a classic Christmas movie. Is everything I'd want from a Christmas movie experience. And though it's not at that top level, it's very, very close. So a couple of years ago, I would have given this an actually good. I'm going to give this an actually great. I love this movie. I will continue to love this movie. And the day that I bring a child into this world is the day I get to pass this movie on to another generation and do so gladly.
Wow, that's
Um,
a special feeling
yeah.
you have. When
Yes.
you get to be our age, old enough to be parents, and you start thinking about the movies that you want to show your kids.
Yeah, I mean, Christmas movies to me is always Star Wars is always coming first, but after that, it's always Christmas movies, and it's because this holiday, like you said, for some people, and it's really unfortunate. It's a tough day and it's a tough time
Mm-hmm.
of year, and even though it's not necessarily not that for me, for me, my childhood, I'll say this: it wasn't a perfect childhood, but every Christmas, my family did everything they could to make it the most special time of year. So I get those feelings still, but obviously, some of us also, maybe our families, maybe some of those people aren't around anymore. And maybe those feelings are in the past. And maybe you look back at photos and you get teary eyed, or you remember, your a present you got, or where you used to spend Christmas, whatever that is. But um, there's so much happiness around the holiday, from the marketing of it to the feelings that you get to, even for some people, the religious aspect of it. So when you watch a movie, for me, you really want it to be special. And when you find that movie, I feel like that's the first thing you think of when you pass movies down to the next generation. So this is definitely on that list for me, if I'm being frank. So very
Man,
excited that we got to cover this.
that was a much more sentimental discussion about Jingle All the Way than I think a lot of people would be expecting. But
Yeah.
hey, man, I love when a movie can make you feel something in a way that's not obvious.
Yeah.
For It's a Wonderful Life to movie. I mean, obviously that's what it was. It was designed in a laboratory
Yeah.
to move you.
It
Basically,
was.
it's
You're correct.
scientifically
Yeah.
proven to do that. But for a seemingly kind of lightweight comedy starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, for that to evoke, the deeper meaning of Christmas, to me, that is not nothing. That's a really special thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I really cherish that. So I guess this is the time that we thank all of you for listening to this a very thorough, especially for us, very thorough discussion.
Dude, this and peek behind the curtain again. This has been the longest discussion that we've had in probably like 6+ months. I mean, maybe the year. This
In
might
a
be the
long
longest of the
time.
year.
In a
Yeah.
long time. Usually we don't go through a movie beat by beat, but I guess that's just how much we had to say. I wanted to make sure that we didn't leave any stone unturned, and
I
thankfully
know.
we addressed
Yeah.
everything. Yeah,
I'm
so
agreeing. I'm agreeing with you there.
thank
I think we did a good job. I hope so.
I hope we did Jingle All the Way justice.
Yeah, which is a
A
weird thing.
sentence
I
I
never
never thought I
expected.
would say.
Yeah. Even
Uh,
me, I never expected that to come out of this, but very pleased.
yeah, but thank you again to everybody, especially if you made it this far. Happy
Nobody's
holidays to
here.
you. It's just me and Connor at this point, but hey, that's
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, if you are still here for some ungodly reason, it probably means that you're crazy enough to continue listening and watching to our rambles about
Yeah.
these these mostly forgotten movies. So yeah, if you liked what you heard and want to check out some discussions we've had about other movies starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, we talked about Terminator 3. Um, one of our earlier episodes. If you want to hear us talk about another Jake Lloyd movie, we've talked about The Phantom Menace twice,
Yes, we have.
and we have a whole lot of episodes about a range of films. Our previous discussion before this again was about the remake of Black Christmas. The slasher movie. So
God, is it different from this movie?
it's
God, is it different from
so
this movie?
different.
Woo!
But I think we've run the whole gambit of Christmas media. I think we've run the
Yeah.
spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. And this episode is going to be our last one before Christmas. We will be taking time to celebrate with our families, and we hope you do the same. But we hope if you're in the Christmas mood, that you listen to us before or on the holiday. Spend your holidays with that bad media. Obviously, what Gabe said, liking, subscribing, commenting, all of those things would help us tremendously. However, you can also, if you'd like to, you can support us on Patreon as well. Patreon.com/thatbadmedia. We have some exciting tiers. Any tier gives you access to exclusives on Patreon. Sometimes we will later release those. So there are several episodes that you can see. Most recently, we released our original Christmas special, our original Not That Bad Christmas special, which covered Santa's Sleigh, another very different Christmas movie experience. So if you want to see that stuff early, or sometimes exclusively, there are things on there that no eyes have seen other than our patrons. It would be amazing for you to check it out, and you'd be supporting independent small creators like us who are just trying to make our way in the world. But we know you are too, so don't feel pressured to support us in that way. Liking, subscribing, and sharing is more than enough to spread our names around and give us more reason to have an ego. So
Yeah.
besides
And,
that, that might
you
be it,
know,
right?
uh, that is it for now. We'll be back in 2025.
Yeah.
Um, who knows what we'll be talking about then?
Oh God.
But be on the lookout for other content from us. We put out a video on the Brat Pack documentary by
Yeah.
Andrew McCarthy, which was a really fun video to make. And I had a lot of thoughts that I just felt compelled to share with people. So if you're interested in that, you can go check that out, and you can check out our catalog for other videos on, pop culture, movies, television. If you've ever thought, hey, like, I remember this movie I saw one time, or what happened to that actor, maybe we've made a video on that. So go check out
Maybe.
the rest
Yeah.
of the channel. Be on the lookout for more content when we come back from the holidays.
Yeah.
And gosh, I think it's time that we close this out, because I don't know how I'm going to cut this down.
Yeah, and I'll say it to everybody for one last goodbye. If you're watching this during the holiday seasons, I wish you and anyone you love a very happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, a happy Kwanzaa, happy Hanukkah, whatever it is that you celebrate out there. I hope you celebrate it with the people you love and have a great time. I'm very fortunate to be doing so on my end. I want to give a quick shout out to our biggest supporter, my mom, who just had her cancer surgery, has it removed, and she's going to be home and there for us with the holidays this year. Can't be more grateful. So I want to thank her for her support over these years, and I want to thank everybody for listening.
You can't beat that as a final note. So we're going to close out.
Yeah,
I'm Gabe,
I'm Connor.
and this is Not That Bad Media, or slash That Bad Media.
It's
Say,
turbo time.
yeah, saying, put that cookie down.